Hey, you are listening to What the Sigma with Chad Stacks. Today on the show, why your paycheck is shrinking faster than gas prices are spiking, and what a $2 tax break really cost you when the roads start falling apart. Real wages just went negative for the first time in 3 years. Not headline inflation, not gas prices, real wages. Down 0.3% year over year in April. That is the number the mainstream coverage buried under the 3.8% CPI print, and it is the only number that actually tells you what is happening to American households right now. Here is the architecture of what we are dealing with. 10 weeks ago, the U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran. Tehran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz, which carries roughly 20 million barrels of oil and LNG per day, about 1/5 of global supply. Gas at the pump is now $4.52 a gallon nationally, up somewhere between $1.50 and $1.54 since the war started. The BLS says gasoline is up 28% year over year. AAA says 44%. Same period, different methodology, 16 percentage points apart. Nobody in the coverage reconciles that gap. I will come back to it. The headline CPI print is 3.8% year over year, biggest jump in 3 years, up from 3.3% in March. That number is real. But core CPI, which strips energy and food, is sitting at 2.8% year over year and 0.4% month over month. The energy shock has not bled into broader goods pricing. Margins are absorbing it, for now. Whirlpool reported revenue down roughly 10% last quarter and called it a recession-level industry decline. That is one data point, single-sourced, but it is the kind of canary you watch. So if core inflation is contained, why does this feel like a crisis? Because real wages do not care about core CPI. They care about what you actually pay at the pump, at the grocery store, at the gas station on the way to work. Heather Long, chief economist at Navy Federal Credit Union, put it plainly. For the first time in 3 years, inflation is eating up all wage gains. That is the transmission mechanism the Fed can rationally ignore, and the White House absolutely cannot. Enter the gas tax holiday. Trump endorsed it publicly, and within 24 hours, you had bills from Josh Hawley, Jefferson Van Drew, and Anna Luna hitting the floor. The federal gas tax is 18.4 cents per gallon for regular, 24.4 for diesel. It has not been raised since 1993. It has never been successfully suspended in its 94-year history. The Biden administration tried in 2022 when gas hit its all-time record of $5.01. Democratic leadership declined to advance it. We are now at $4.52 and closing. Trump's own framing of the proposal was, and I'm quoting directly here, a small percentage, but it's still money. The President of the United States implicitly conceding that his centerpiece response to a $1.54 per gallon price shock is marginal in the same sentence he is pitching it. That is either extraordinary self-awareness or extraordinary political desperation. I will let you decide. Chuck Schumer did the math out loud. Let's not pretend 18 cents of gas tax relief per gallon makes up for the damage created with this war. 18 cents isn't $1.50. Patrick DeHaan at Gas Buddy said it even more cleanly. The irony of a gas tax suspension is that the higher prices go, the less of an impact it has. Andrew Lautz at the Bipartisan Policy Center put the cost of a 5-month suspension at somewhere between $12 billion and $17 billion, depending on which outlet you read his estimate in. Same analyst, same organization, 2 different numbers published 1 day apart. The coverage on this is genuinely sloppy. Here's the part nobody is writing about. The Highway Trust Fund, which the gas tax feeds, is already projected to run dry by 2028. The proposed workaround is a general fund backfill. That sounds like a technical footnote. It is not. The user fee principle, the idea that the people who use roads pay for roads, has been the structural foundation of U.S. highway financing since 1932. A general fund backfill severs that principle permanently. It is a quiet infrastructure finance revolution buried inside a populist gas price talking point, and not a single outlet in the source set examines what that precedent means for the EV and hybrid vehicle fees that are supposed to shore up the HTF going forward. The per fillup math is brutal for the proposal. A sedan driver saves roughly $2 per fillup. An SUV driver saves between $2.36 and $3.09. Meanwhile, Indiana is delivering roughly 60 cents per gallon in relief through state-level tax waivers. That is more than 3 times what the federal proposal offers, and it is already happening. The federal action increasingly looks symbolic, which may be the point. The Capitol Hill whip count is where this gets structurally interesting. John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, is not a fan, but open to hearing the president out. That is a soft no with an escape hatch. James Lankford, who chairs the Senate Finance Energy Subcommittee, is a hard no, citing debt. Graves in the House is opposed. Rick Scott said, and I am quoting, "I'll cut every tax you can, but I'd like to balance the budget too." There is no unified GOP line. There are at least 5 competing bills with different durations, different triggers, different offsets. The Kelly, Blumenthal, and Papist Democratic bill conveniently runs through October 1st of next year, which is approximately 1 month before the midterms. Nobody is calling that a coincidence because it is not a coincidence. Now back to the BLS versus AAA gap. BLS says gasoline is up 28% year over year. AAA says 44%. The most likely explanation is base period weighting and index construction methodology. But the practical implication is that if you are a household making decisions based on what you actually paid at the pump last year versus today, the 44% number is closer to your lived experience. The 28% number is what goes into the CPI calculation. That gap is not academic. It is the difference between a policy response calibrated to a real shock and one calibrated to a statistical artifact. The Fed dimension here is the most underreported thread in the entire story. Kevin Warsh is expected to be confirmed as Jerome Powell's successor this week. Trump's rate cut pressure has been relentless and well documented. But Warsh is walking into confirmation during an inflationary supply shock driven by a war the administration launched. Austin Goolsbee reportedly called the Iran impact more like an inflationary shock earlier this month, though the full framing is behind a blocked paywall. If that read is accurate, it signals the FOMC is not treating this as a demand-side problem amenable to rate cuts. Warsh's presumed mandate from Trump and the operational reality he inherits are pointing in opposite directions. That is an institutional credibility test with no clean resolution. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which the Biden administration deployed aggressively during the 2022 Russia-Ukraine price shock, does not appear in any of the coverage as a policy option. Its absence from the conversation is notable, given that the Hormuz blockade is structurally more disruptive to global supply than Russian sanctions were. Here is the actual call. The 3.8% headline CPI number is a lagging indicator of a supply shock that is already partially absorbed. Month-over-month CPI decelerated from 0.9% in March to 0.6% in April. The initial war shock is being digested. But real wages are negative, core margins are absorbing pressure they cannot absorb indefinitely, and the political clock to November 3rd runs about 6 months faster than the economic transmission timeline. The gas tax holiday is not an economic policy. It is a midterm artifact. The real question is whether Congress passes something symbolic enough to give Trump a signing ceremony and marginal enough that it does not accelerate the demand-side imbalance DeHaan flagged, where subsidizing consumption during a supply shock pushes prices higher, not lower. The worst version of this story is that Congress delivers the 18 cents, takes credit for the relief, and the pass-through goes to refiners instead of drivers. That happened in 2022. Nobody modeled the pass-through rate then. Nobody is modeling it now. Consistent, at least. Remember, nothing said in this podcast is financial advice. This has been another fire episode at What the Sigma. Smash that follow button and tap 5 stars to spread the butter. Fortune favors the bold, baby.
Grab news. Thomas.